Welcome everybody. It's 9:07. I call this meeting to order. I'll need this as soon as you're ready.
Director Bradley,
Here.
Director Brands,
Here.
Director Cardenas,
Here.
Director Daly,
Here.
Director Keithley, Director Litvak, here, Director Olson, Director Peterson,
Here.
Director Prokopis,
Here.
Director Solicitor,
Here.
Director Stevenson.
Here. Thank you. All right, we're moving to public comments. Do we have any public comments today? And online comments? Okay, seeing that. Item 3 is Lovisa update from Councilmember Brad.
Right off the bat, huh?
That's right.
Um. Well, I wish I had something new to say, and I don't. This has almost become circular in terms of everybody's waiting for somebody else to declare something. So Lisa, the last official statement we've made as a body is that we will remain united as a body. And more discussion has to take place in terms of seeing if anything has changed since that policy statement. And our question now to Lisa members is, should we be in July if we have anything to really talk about? I think one of our concerns is, what are the contracting models that are out there? And when will they be revealed? And that may give some guidance to where we want to go. But at this stage, I can't say if we have anything new to offer that we've already stated in the past. To take any questions, but I'm not sure I'll have any decent answers.
I have some questions. So first of all, because I know that at least for a while, Lisa didn't have a director, and I don't know if it has counsel, but does Lisa have management that can work with its members to kind of address these problems?
Say that again.
So I'm asking, do you have an executive director or some position?
Well, Rachel Anderson has joined us, as you all know, as our legal counsel, but also to provide direction in many of these issues. So she's online. Yes. She is.
Okay, so Rachel is serving in that role.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then one of the questions that I think has been out there is whether Lisa would have the ability to contract with more than one agency to provide law enforcement services for its members, so that maybe some would be serviced by the sheriff's department and some by UPD. Is there been any kind of clarification of that question?
Are you asking, can these members choose who to receive services from?
I think that's at least an element of that question, right? If you had members of Lisa that wanted to do different things, yes, is there any opinion that Lisa can do that? I don't see anything that would prevent it, but I don't know whether
that very well may be true. As I said earlier, the last statement of Lisa, the official policy was that we would remain together, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you can interpret that to mean that we would seek one common service provider, or open the doors you suggested to looking at various providers depending upon the township. That's one of the questions, and I think clearly part of the answer will be where our service is going to be most efficiently and cost effectively provided. We don't know that. Is that fair? I mean, I hate to.
Well, you can only tell me where it is.
But I just, I have some personal feelings about it, but that's not, it's not relevant.
So Jeff, one of our big questions for Lisa is, since 40% of our budget is Kennecott. What is gonna happen with that once there's a division between the sheriff's office and the, where's that funding going? Because that will dictate a lot of what Savisa can or cannot do.
And that is a very appropriate question. I think that really probably maybe the whole nut of the issue.
I think so.
And I'm not sure we have an answer. And I'm going to defer to Aaron. I'm sorry.
Yeah, how do we get to an answer on that? I mean, I think you're right. That's one of the key things that needs to be addressed or resolved. And how do we get there? I mean, that's one of the questions that this board asked the county to answer by July 1st, is like, what's going to happen with centrally assessed funding. So, and I, disclosure, I just asked Deputy Mayor Ledbeck for a meeting with her and Mayor Wilson, so at least Midvale Holiday and Mill Creek can discuss this, because the county mayor's office has had discussions with the townships, but not with the cities. And we, have a concern about being just, the same kind of concern that the townships would have. We just want to know what's going on so that we can plan appropriate to make sure that our residents are protected.
That's very fair. But I'm not sure I can add to that conversation.
Well, and I don't know that we have an answer yet. And as mayor, as I said, we'd be happy to honor that request, and I'll work with Mayor Wilson to set up a time to talk, but it's no different than the cities talking to the townships and the county not being included. So I think, again, we're back to, this is the opportunity for us to convene and update each other on what conversations are happening and what everybody's working on. I think we know, based on the legislation and the requirements of the legislation, or how we perceive the requirements to be, we're all losing efficiencies as it relates to law enforcement. And our sheriff's office and the team there is putting together a new model for our law enforcement bureau. They're working as hard as they can on that. And once we have that sort of reorganizational structure within the sheriff's office, and we're waiting for some information from HR, who's doing an analysis of salary and other things to help educate that, to ensure we have an appropriate budget outlined. That's the information we're waiting on. And when we have that information, we know that the cost of law enforcement for unincorporated county is going to go up for a couple of reasons. One, we're losing this efficiency, right? By being partners here at UPD. And secondarily, we have some additional development that's happening in the West End as it relates to some trails being built in the Butterfield Canyon, which is going to require additional law enforcement. So all of the budget pieces are being put together so we can understand what those increased costs are and how much of the funding is needed related to Savisa as far as related to the increased cost for unincorporated. So all of that work is happening, and it's happening as quickly as it can. And then the sheriff and the undersheriff are also working on a contract model so that everyone could understand, if they wanted to contract with the sheriff, what their costs might be as it relates to law enforcement for their areas. So that's the work that's going on. I can't give you definitive answers until we get to a solid place around the budget.
Okay. And I mean, I know all of these things are kind of chicken and egg problems, if you will, but we need to get some movement, breaking some of the logjam. We need to start resolving some of the issues so that we can plan if we're going to meet a timeline. So I think we need to have the discipline of setting timelines for that and communicating those so that we can plan on that, because
Well, you don't just
my
need it on the
sense
county
is
side.
that
You need it on the UPD 2 side too, so people can make decisions.
yeah, but my sense is that there are so many unsolved variables here that it's hard for anybody to make progress on anything. And that is not a situation that we can continue to have. We're going to find ourselves in trouble on a timely basis. And also, there's the other thing out there where I know that all of our rank and file officers are wondering like what's going to happen still, and that's a concern for us. So.
Interesting.
I agree there's decisions that need to be made on the UPD side, but we can't make our decisions till we know what the sheriff's gonna take back with her to the county and to fulfill the statutory requirements. And we need to know what's left for us to build 2.0. And I think Naz is in is in a tough spot till we know those answers. How can you build a 2.0 when we don't know what exactly the sheriff? So I feel like the sheriff's piece is probably the first step before UPD can make any decision.
I think we've articulated at every meeting since the conversation began, what would we be bringing back to the county? And that work
A list of
continues.
those things would be nice, because we talked about it, but actually, putting something to paper so we can look at that, that would be good for me.
Sheriff to speak to that.
Right, every single meeting I have spoke at, I have said, we're taking all statutory duties and countywide services. If you need a list of those, we're happy to provide that. It's in the budget book, you know, it's all spelled out in there, which duties are, it's in the budget book of what is countywide services. The intent for us is to take all of it. Countywide services and statutory duties. And we have not been building a contract model up until the time we met with the townships and we were asked to build a contract model. So prior to that, the undersheriff has been here multiple times as well and said, this is what he's doing. He's going to brief you today. He's building a statutory duty and a countywide services organizational chart for the Law Enforcement Bureau. And with that, we are now going to be adding on contract services, but we have to wait till our county HR has some good numbers for wages, because we can build out all we want, but until we know what we can pay people, it's really hard to put a budget together. And that's what we are waiting for. And the last meeting we did indicate it would be early August. That we may get the numbers, but there's no guarantee. And like I said, Under Sheriff Peterson will come up here today. He's on the agenda, give you an update of what he's building out, and he can talk about the different services. But that hasn't changed. Statutory and countywide have always, we've said that for months. That's the intent of the sheriff to take those back. But we're happy to provide you a list of all those items.
Sure, do you have an idea of what type of shared services you'll be taking?
Well, the shared services, a lot of shared services we already have in the sheriff's office. So like an HR department, the Salt Lake County Sheriff has an HR department within the sheriff's office, and we also have county HR. So we would not be needing to share human resources with UPD or anybody else. So it would be those kind of shared services that we just don't need it, because we would be duplicating, which we do right now. The same with our fiscal team. We have a fiscal team with the sheriff's office and also the county already. So those teams would not, we would not be partnering with anyone. Because we already have it. All we will do is add to those teams for the amount of people that we're hiring. There are services that we already have a contract with VEC, so we wouldn't need to share VEC. You know, our radio services, our tech services, our IT, we already have that on the sheriff's side, so we don't need to share those with other agencies. What we are looking at is possibly talking to the county and see if we can get the support of maybe having an evidence room, county-wide evidence room, where other agencies may be able to participate in the county-wide evidence, because we do know across the board, every agency that's left UPD and agencies that have never joined UPD are struggling with what to do with their evidence. And that takes a huge toll on everybody's budget. So we are taking a look at that and possibly partnering with our car team, you know, that we do now. We're taking a look at, we already have a K9 unit in the sheriff's office, and we can just either grow ours, that's the intent, but there's a possibility we may partner. For sure, SWAT, we would partner with others. Because it just makes sense but all of those have to be identified, but not a lot of shared services will be continued sharing with the UPD. Simply because we don't need to. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think that in my mind, as we talk about seeing something in writing, I think it would be really helpful, because yes, it makes sense as you talk about this, but I don't know.
Okay.
I think your understanding of what you need, and even your understanding of statutory duties and countywide, and what kind of equipment or employees you're gonna need to take with that, I think would be, that's in my mind. It's not just necessarily it's not just saying, well, canyon patrol, in my mind, well, what is that? How many people is that? What kind of equipment? And then if there are places of shared services, I think that as we talk about seeing something in writing, that's.
Yeah, I think we have to have a discussion about some of the shared. I mean, I understand statutory duties. I understand countywide, county funded, general fund things. Some of the other shared services, like on the cars team, we maybe want to push back on that. I mean, that's and a lot of that depends on how many people will UPD side be serving versus how many the county side will be serving, because the cars team may be better located at UPD and have a contracting system where the sheriff's department can contract with UPD for that service. And I think there are opportunities we're going to find for UPD 2.0 to contract with the sheriff or the county for some things too. Like, you know, we know that we had a study about that. County can provide that. Maybe the county provides that under a contract. Same thing with fleet, things like that. But that's why I think getting a list where we can actually talk about each one of these things will be productive. And then, you know, hopefully we come to agreement about what makes sense. There are some of these things, I think, where what ends up being the larger agency is the place where it makes sense to have that capability reside.
Governance, as I understand it, the UPD board it will continue with whoever goes with UPD.
I don't know. I am not part of the UPD 2.0 creation meetings. I'm being briefed by Chief Mazerin, but I don't know what kind of governance they've already discussed with the new UPD.
Governance of sheriff is the county council,
No, it's the sheriff.
and so Sylvisa governance, Sylvisa board will remain as members of Sylvisa.
Right.
Presumably.
Presumably, but isn't, and this is the part that I keep struggling with, and I think Councilmember Bradley mentioned it, but the critical piece is the centrally assessed. And how do we, where's the point of clarification on that regarding Sylvisa's, I don't know if right's the right word, but that 40% piece that funds Sylvisa seems to be the critical piece, but I've never heard a clarifying comment in terms of whether they are going to retain that funding or not. How do we get to that? Who makes that decision? Is it a legal interpretation? But the critical piece is the centrally.
Was that you on there?
it
I
was
guess.
me.
I think that was you on there.
Is there a delay?
So I guess the way I can answer that is right now Sylvisa is all together. Salt Lake County's in Sylvisa, all the members of Sylvisa, so that 40% stays there. It is dependent on what Sylvisa does. So I don't make those decisions. But whatever Sylvisa decides to do, and Councilman Bradley said that the current plan is that they all stay together in Sylvisa. Well, that money would stay there. Now, it depends on who contracts with who, because Sylvisa will have to either contract with UPD 2.0, another agency, or Salt Lake County Sheriff. Once they make those decisions, then I think that they'll take a look at, you know, the funding as Sylvisa as a whole. All of it is that Sylvisa's money.
Okay, good.
There's one catch to that, is if Sylvisa goes with the sheriff's office, there will not be a governing board.
But I mean, my only question was that was never clarified to me, and as long as Solvisa maintains its organizational structure, then that centrally assessed piece will flow into there. And that will give them the flexibility they need to make whatever decisions. If that centrally assessed piece left, it
And it could
basically
leave any
financially
time,
collapses, right? I mean, you can't take 40% of a funding source and have it be viable anymore. So that was my only question. So I think, so as long as Solvisa, but I think it's back to Mayor Silvestrini's question of, does Solvisa have some flexibility within the organization to say, we can actually we can actually give services two different ways depending on the member, right? Like Magna and Kearns could go this way and then, you know, so on and so forth.
That's well stated.
Okay, anyway, that helps clarify that for me, so thanks.
I'm curious,
Karen's comment on the, when I said there would be no governing board if the contract resolution, she just said that's not definitive.
no, there
We're
would
having
be an
conversations.
advisory board, but yeah, there would
But
be no
advisory board doesn't
governing
have
board.
it.
Nobody that would govern.
Advisory board does not.
The advisory board can have input.
Yeah, input, but no vote.
Advisory boards vote, but make recommendations all the time.
Yeah, but they can be rejected too.
Well, they could.
And voted by the county council who does the funding.
Right,
Yes,
exactly.
just like they could by your council to have the funding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was just thinking through, if Slovisa stays intact, would the sheriff come to this board with her budget presentation, just like Magna Precinct has to? There's so much money in Slovisa. Magna Precinct comes with a budget, gets theirs. Would the sheriff come to this body and it would be passed through from Slovisa back to the sheriff's office to fund her law enforcement?
I wouldn't
You are a
come to
member
the
just like the rest of us.
board. I would go to the Slovisa.
Did I say, yeah, I'm sorry, Slovisa.
So it wouldn't be
That's
this
what I-
one.
that's what I
It would
meant,
be this, I would go to the Slovisa board and do exactly how we do our budget here, but present it to them.
My simple mind, when I think about what, and I don't fully understand all the statutory stuff, and there's only 14,000 residents, right? I think that should be relatively small in the grand scheme of things of what funds Slovisa might lose back to the sheriff. Now, you said you're taking over statutory and countywide, but yet you don't need HR, you don't need legal. That's, to me, that's not taking back everything. We need to know what's left. If there's 5 FTEs in HR and you
That's
don't
what
need
we
them.
are trying to build for
Okay,
you.
that's what I was getting. I just want you to understand, I'm like, okay, there's 10 people in this division, you're taking back some of them. That leaves us with 8 FTEs, you're gonna take 2 in this division, you're taking $1 million out of that budget and leaving what's left, so that we can build something.
Well, like I said, we're waiting for our county HR to give us numbers, because we don't want to give, you know, false numbers, and then everybody's going, oh, she just raised the price. So we want to make sure some good, accurate data that we're providing to everyone. We can provide you the list of statutory duties and countywide services. And, you know, the list of HR, finance, lead, whatever we don't need to share, we can provide you that list as well. But as far as Slovisa goes, the county is building quite a bit of trails in the west side, the southwest. We have known for quite some time that we are going to increase our canyon units by double. That is going to come out of Slovisa budget, because it's not west side, southwest side. So with that, it is going to take some of that 40%. We just haven't requested it yet because the trails aren't done. But as soon as those trails are done, I'm going to go right to Slovisa. Slovisa can say, no, Sheriff, we're not going to fund it. But I mean, you know, they fund everybody else that's a member of Slovisa. So that really is going to take a toll. That's why we have been pushing for Slovisa members to find other alternative funding, because we knew that once these trails are built, we have to have more canyon cars to work the west side. So we will be going to Slovisa and requesting, you know, to fund
But remember, if she or the town council comes to Savisa board, the Savisa board will only advise, we will not have.
No, this is not for that piece.
We have vote. Oh, this is really confusing. You're saying that.
That's if you contracted with the sheriff's office. The current process is
Oh,
you
the
don't.
current process, yeah. Current
Yeah.
process, yeah.
And that's gonna happen as soon as the mayor's office says the trails are ready to beat the troll. I'm going to Slavisa and say, I need more canyon cars
Currently, yeah.
currently.
But what
So
there's
you
the
will get to
division-
make that.
but what there's the division between
Just like this.
UPD and the sheriff's office, then you'll be coming to the board for what?
To present a budget. So that is for unincorporated area. Now, if somebody or any partners in Slavisa contract with the sheriff's office, I would be taking those budgets to Slavisa as well. But if half of Slavisa doesn't contract, I won't take those because it would be up to the UPD 2.0 to do that.
So where is the advisory council coming?
That is whoever contracts with the sheriff's office will be part of an advisory board where we
Which is
sit down
separate
and
from
we
the Slavisa
listen
board.
to
Yes.
what your needs are.
And
Yes,
it's separate from the Savisa
Yes.
board.
it's totally separate. It's not part of
service
service.
levels, services.
I know it's very confusing.
It is.
It's almost similar to this board, but this board governs what I do as an elected, you know, a CEO. So it won't govern us. We just work together.
I've got a question for you. I'll open this up to all Louisa members. What is Louisa doing to make sure that you all are united? This has been part of my concern as I talk with the townships. It is very much up to this point, it has been, we're sticking with UPD. As I talk with folks from the county, it seems like more like it's expecting that the townships are going to go to the sheriff's office. And so I don't know, my concern is that united, that the group is not on the same definition of that. And so what's Louisa doing to make sure that you're getting on the same page?
So when I say that the Savisa board is unanimous, they want to say it's district. But where that district lands, I don't think our district has decided where they want to land. Am I correct?
Restate that.
The thing that I know that we're unanimous on, because we were asked that with the meeting with the county mayor too, is we want to remain as a district.
Yes.
We're united that we want to be as a district, but as far as where that district lands for services, we have not made a determination of that because we don't have enough information
That's correct.
to make.
And there's other variations on that as well, in terms of would there be any temptation to bifurcate those services among different townships? And those are the types of discussions that the Lisa members have to have. And that will occur this month. We can have that discussion, and then it may or may not change depending upon funding models that here. But at least it's a step forward in recommitment to where Lisa is and what we want to do. I wish I could be more specific, but it's premature.
Yes, my concern is, I mean, the three cities met last week and knowing that, so we've hit this July 1st date of where we said we're going to try to set the table, and there's still a lot of unknowns in that. Internally, we've set this July 1st, 2024 date that I'm getting concerned about. We're at under a year from now. This is the sheriff and I had a brief conversation about this. You know, we as a board set that day, and so the sheriff, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the sheriff is planning to separate out at that. And so how do we ensure that we've got public safety up and running in our communities less than a year from now? And I think the cities are getting to this point of being concerned that it's not, or is it going to work with having the townships there? And I think our mindsets are starting to shift of focusing on a 3-city model. Because we have so many of these unanswered questions that we still don't know, and we're running out of time. And so I think my mindset is definitely shifting, and I think the other two are.
Yes, I mean, I want to make it totally clear that our preference is to have the townships be part of this. But given that, I mean, and then the other thing too is, I mean, this is kind of like, maybe we'll get some more clarity after we have the opportunity to meet with Mayor Wilson and Aaron on what you guys have talked about with the county. But I've talked to some people in the township about the townships about the fact that there's at least a perception that well, may say this, the best way to say this is the county sheriff is inviting them to contract with the sheriff's office rather than being part of UPD. And that gives us pause. You know, what happens if we get down the road, we don't have a plan, you know, for essentially those of us that don't want to do that. So for lack of a better term, 3-city model, should we be developing that city model as a contingency in case between the unanswered questions about the centrally assessed and what the townships can afford and all that we end up, you know, up the creek without being prepared. So I don't know that it's right to launch into that yet, but that's kind of what we're nervous about, right? And I think we just want to make you guys be upfront about that. I like I said though, I want clear that we also are unanimous in the idea that UPD and our police force will be stronger if the townships and the cities are part of it at the end of the day. And I get that unincorporated county needs to be policed by the sheriff's office, right? But anyway, that's kind of our nervousness. And then there's, you know, the mechanism of that, you know, I mean, Chief Matherin could be given instructions to go off and prepare a three-city model, but I don't want to, you know, do that at the cost of upsetting people. Okay. And it may not be necessary. That's why it's important to us to get some clarity about, you know, what is really going to take shape here.
I just want to add, because I 100% agree with everything that Jeff just said. I see the pathway exists for the townships and the cities to continue in a policing model together. And I guess where I get concerned is, does that pathway exist? Can it all be put together less than a year from now? And can it be put together by July 1st, 2025? If that's the case, and if that's going to be the date, then we need to talk with the sheriff about what that means. And so again, with what Silvestrini said, not trying to fully go into that mode, but it is concerns that we have. And I think that we want to start having smaller group conversations with the townships to figure out how can we make this work, because we want to see it work. We're just getting nervous about that, and we want to do that here pretty soon, to have those conversations and see if we can make it work with the individual communities.
I think it makes sense to create a 3-city model. The sheriff's office is creating a model that doesn't include any of the townships as well. By moving over her statutory responsibility and moving over countywide, she's building out that model, not knowing what the final decisions will be of some of our other members related to Slovisa. And it would make sense to me that UPD 2 would build out a 3-city model, also not knowing the answer to that question. Because that's how we're going to get to what would it cost for the townships to be part of the sheriff's part. And I think that's how you would get to, if the townships joined the 3 cities, what would those costs look like?
So we really need to do 2 things. I mean, we need to know, the townships need to know what it costs to be in UPD as well.
Correct.
We need to have a robust UPD 2.0 that includes all the townships and the cities, and maybe then one that's a 3-city model for comparison, and just so that we have comfortable with it. We're not going to be given that decision by, you know, Silvisa that it's going to the sheriff's office, and then we are not prepared to
know it either way.
The other thing that I'll just recommend, I mean, I know that in talking with Chief Mazur, and I know that this is something we talk about with Wilson as well, but I've heard that Salt Lake County intends to basically take over this building and that there won't be a place for UPD here. And I get that, the lease agreement has a termination provision that says if the county withdraws from the UPD, that the lease is terminated. And I'm presuming that would be the legal way that this happens. Otherwise, I don't know how you terminate the lease, but that's another thing we need to factor in on this. And we've talked with our meeting with Chief Mazur about, to what extent could precincts absorb some of the shared services things, and that conversation should include townships that have facilities for that too. Like what kind of room do you have for something? You may have to split things up. And admittedly, I mean, those efficiencies are, but that's the kind of thing too that I think we can start solving some of the variables. Like, do we have the building? It sounds like the answer is we don't have the building for UPD moving forward. And I guess I'm asking to confirm that. We'll want to confirm that with what Wilson.
Well, I think that is the sheriff's building, so I
Right,
think
right.
that the
And when I
intention
have
is that
staff-
she's gonna centralize her staff here.
Because I have staff that is at the government center. And my intent is to bring them all under one roof. So that is the intent. Timelines haven't been drawn out yet. One other thing I want to say is you said that I am going out and inviting townships to contract with the sheriff's office. That's not accurate.
Okay.
I was asked by Kearns Township to give them a contract model because they can't make a decision whether or not they would contract or go with UPD 2.0 or another agency until there's numbers. And I said I would do that, and I offered to do it for the rest of the townships or anybody in Slovisa or anybody that's part of UPD. But I did not go out and solicit that. That was part of the conversation that occurred with the townships and the mayor's office, and I was there. And that's how that contract model came out. It was not me trying to sell the sheriff's office. Our current model does not include contracting, but we will be building a contract model at the request of the townships.
Once we have the base.
Okay. Well, I always ordered something slightly different, but that's part of the problem when times aren't in the room.
Yeah, just give me a call, I'll tell you. They were all in the room. They all know. Well, you weren't in the room, your man was.
Well, let me just add this. I don't think there's a person in this room who doesn't want to see this resolved to the betterment of the community and townships, cities, and UPD, and the whole works. We want to get this resolved. The process is very painful, clearly. Out of that will come some creativity, I believe, where we will arrive at a solution. And I think any date to set is basically arbitrary, July 1st or whatever. You can change the election date for a general election. You can probably change our timetable as well. I'm confident that we're going to come up with something, but like I said, it's very painful. And some of the questions that be asked too, is there a need for UPD 2.0? I mean, that might be a question to ask. I haven't even thought that through. Nevertheless, I'm confident we're going to be able to get it. It takes, like I said, I think everybody here is committed to spend the time necessary.
We knew this was gonna be difficult and we knew it was gonna be complicated. And we knew we were all losing efficiencies. So everybody's trying to figure out their best path forward on what they can afford to do for law enforcement. And until we build out those models, I don't know that anybody's making definitive decisions.
Okay, any other comments on this item before I invite Chief Mazur up? Mazur, you're up. Oh. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this conversation. I think it's really important. It's been good. We have to have the crucial conversations. And, as of July 1, the funding dropped for me to be in this new assignment for Chief Dial to take my place. So, time to hit the afterburners, get this thing moving. Talk more about that in a minute, but I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July. Justin said he had a great time with you yesterday. Enjoyed the Mill Creek Parade. It was lots of fun. Magna, it's great. Even though they still had some squirt guns out, hammering some more folks, still okay. But I hope you enjoy the 4th of July. It's a nice moment. All right, so for my update, I want to share a few things that we've been working on that are really going to start to ramp up now that everything is in place. I've scheduled a number of meetings with various groups from various board members. I'll continue to do that. I will be scheduling some meetings upcoming with Solid County and looking forward to meeting with all of you. I have a number of meetings tomorrow with one of our Visa members. And so I'm looking forward to that. When we have those meetings, you as a board member, please feel free to invite anybody you think should be in that meeting. Whether, city managers or council people or whoever, bring them and we'll talk to anybody and answer questions. Everything. And I'll show you some of the models that are being built right now. We're going to build some additional models. But I'll show you where our baseline's at right now, which I think you'll find of interest. And continue to communicate with everyone and get that information out there. So again, please invite anybody you want to have come to those. I think we'll meet with Kearns tomorrow. And most of the police members tomorrow. And then we'll schedule some meetings with the county and go from there. We've now established a number of work groups. One of those is our commanded work group, which is essentially all our chiefs. We're meeting fairly regularly now. We have a meeting on the 11th, and we built some work charts out. We've looked at the shared services. We're trying to establish how that works or how that will look in the future. Then our meeting on the 11th, we're looking at precincts, because that's one thing we've never looked at is the structure of the precincts and where we can create some efficiencies there. So that will be on the 11th. We have our reorganization committee, which is really driving it, building these new organization charts and looking at different models, which are the 3 cities model. The 3 cities is the Visa. The 3 cities is the Visa contracting with outside entities. We'll be meeting on the 13th. That group. We have a policy group that's looking at our new policies, revamping that. They made excellent progress. Ted Adams back there, part of that. They're moving on very quickly. The other thing that's really important is last week created a facilities team to Mayor String's point. I just learned recently that the sheriff is bringing everybody back to this building. Makes perfect sense, but we're going to have to get out of here, and we're going to lose that space. So we got to figure out where we're going to go. We're looking at a number of different options, and we're probably going to contract with a broker here fairly soon. Commercial space.
Is that date 2024 or 2025?
No, there is no date. That's the intent. And the sheriff and I have talked about this. The intent is to bring over those Solid County personnel into this building, but there is no set date. Eventually that will happen. But some of these teams that we're building right now, we're looking at, got to really, these are some of the big problems we're dealing with right now. So like a building as well, because if we find a place that we go and we collect centrally, it's going to require us to probably maybe do some upfitting and some IT and some different things. So the time is now to try to figure that out. So we'll be engaging a broker here probably this week to start looking at some commercial properties that we can use. So
I mean, so you gotta give the broker some parameters about square footage and things like that. Do you have, and how do we even do that? You do that.
So we have actually the square footage we use here. I've already emailed that out to that group that's gonna meet, and they're gonna set up the, I've emailed them the square footage we use here. They're setting up criteria that we're gonna give to the broker, saying these are the things that we need to start to be in a building, where that may be. So they're gonna look at things like security, parking, space, IT, those types of things. So we're working on that right now.
But that will be. Well, that requirement be it's a chicken and egg thing again, right?
Yep, it's absolutely.
So would it be a UPD, you know, a three city model and then an expanded model? We need this much, so you actually
Planning.
have to have it, okay.
Yeah, everything we're doing right now is like, what does this look like versus what does this look like? And how do we figure that out? And how do we be prepared to shift either direction regardless, you know, what happens? That's one of the challenges right now is where, you know, what does this look like? And until we know how much clay we have, we can't build it. So, that's why this discussion, I think today's been good.
I just want to encourage, I mean, talk about this, I guess, but, you know, let's make sure that, you know, we don't get more space than what we need, because I think we can use, I think some of these things can be moved down to the precinct level. If there's available space, and I'm just based on that, based on the fact that I knew that no group is going to have available space for some of that in our.
For the first year or two, we can put it wherever we can find room to ensure that we get the right size structure.
Great. Yeah, so when we meet on the 11th, the commanders were asked to go look at your precincts and say, what can I fit in here? How many bodies can I fit here? So that's one of the questions we're gonna answer. We also have Harry working on the new interlocal agreement. And Captain Andrew Word is working on our tech stuff. Because that's another pretty major project in terms of separating records and some of the other things that we have with the sheriff's office. And he's been making a lot of progress on that. I've been impressed with it. In the next 10 days, I'll be building a timeline that I will share with all of you, starting for July 1 this year until July of next year. Again, I would ask that I wouldn't fall in love with the July 1, 2024, if the sheriff's office, that's their benchmark, that's great, but I think there's so many variables, some things could happen between now and then that could maybe change or need adjustments. So
I was thinking that, could that have been a little premature of us to move that date ahead by a year?
yeah, yep,
And this board could change that.
absolutely.
The thing that we have to keep in mind with that is at this point, the sheriff is still planning separate at that point. So it's not just what we are doing, it's what the sheriff's office is doing. So if we are choosing and saying we're going to need to push this back, then I think that we're going to need an understanding of right now, if you separate out on July 1st, 2024, what does that actually look like for this organization? And then if we needed to push it back, are you willing, and how would that work?
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I'm shooting for July 1, 2024. The sheriff is, Jake is. I'm just saying, as we like dig deeper and deeper and deeper, we see all the variables. We're like, oh man, it's crazy. We can get it done. I think we can do it. I don't think we can. I know we can do it, but is that the right thing to do? Is it too fast? We're pushing too hard. Are we going so fast that we're making some decisions that won't really play out, you know, years down the road after we're all gone? So I'm just throwing that out there because I want to kind of your radar. So I'll have a timeline built out. I will share that with all of you here in the next few days. Another thing I've been thinking about a lot is now that we're in this new space. In terms of my reassignment and Chief Dell's reassignment, one of my primary goals is to be communication both internally and externally. So I will be meeting with all of you, talking to you. I think that's going to be so important. It's so obvious to me right now that we need to talk, we need to communicate, we need to get information out that's viable, legitimate information to our employees and to our board, to our elected officials. So that's one of my primary goals. And then last thing I want to just throw out there is I'm thinking a lot recently about change. You know, change is the only inevitable thing in life. And we're all going through a lot of change here, and it's not always easy. Sometimes it's difficult. And thinking about that, you know, in terms of not only the transformation we're going through right now, but you know, philosophically. And I want to throw out there again, as we build some of these models, and we're building some of these budget things. I think it's really important to understand that, you know, those are baselines, those are the starting points, but those things are going to change, and that's why I'm reluctant to share them here in this kind of public meeting, because if we do that and everybody says, well, that's the end product, right? No, it's not. Things are going to keep changing and changing and evolving. So, you know, I know it's not easy, and you know, I'm speaking to folks back here too, that you know, this change has been difficult, challenging, but we can get through it and make the best of it. We'll go to the next step, the next level. If anyone has any questions for me.
Chief, I got a question. So now we've kind of pivoted this position where we agree we have to build kind of two separate models, which are going to look very different in terms of the shared services piece, right? With the 3-city model and then an expanded model. And it's really important, at least to me, that we have very accurate numbers in terms of what those two models look like, especially for, I guess, Solvisa, so they can analyze it, unless I'm getting this wrong. So Solvisa can properly analyze what is going to be the best fit for them. So, you know, the sheriff's putting that piece together from her side, it sounds like. And we need to put that piece together from our side, which is a pretty heavy lift. And so my question is, do you feel like you've got enough administrative capacity? Do we need to consider as a board if you need any, you know, and I don't know, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but I'm just trying to imagine the challenge you have building those models and making sure they're accurate so that we can make proper assessments. And do we need to consider any kind of consulting additions to what you're doing? Do you feel like you've got enough administrative capacity to put those together in a timely and accurate way? Just kind of asking.
No.
Am I putting you in a tough spot there?
No, not at all. That's a legitimate question. Give me 14 days. I can answer that. But right now, I think that we can. We've got a great staff. We've got good teams. We've got all these folks behind me that have been doing an excellent job, and I think we can get to where we need to go. But this question with Solvisa and what direction they want to shift, or what direction they're going to go, whether it's 3 cities, Solvisa, whatever. That's the pivotal point.
That's the tipping point, because that shared services model is going to look dramatically different, at least in my mind, from a 3-city model to a model that includes Solvisa. That shared services piece is going to look dramatically different. So as quickly as we can get to that, the better off we're going to be. But we want to make sure that the numbers that are going to be presented are as accurate as we can make them, so we know that we feel confidence in that decision. So that's one, in the administrative piece. The other piece, the timing piece, and I was a big advocate of this, is moving as quickly as we possibly can so that we don't create a vacuum that's filled with what everybody knows it's filled with. But that statement was also made before all these details, the complications of actually doing this started to be clarified. I think the important important piece is that we will be able to communicate what, once these questions are answered, what the end point is. That we have a definitive end point that we say we're gonna get to. If we have to expand the timeline, I think that's fine as long as we can communicate that, because there will be all sorts of timing pieces to a Sylvisa in terms of, how they fund that long term if they decide to incorporate, so on and so forth. So anyway, but if you get to the point where if you don't think you have the administrative capacity to put this together and there's a way to supplement that, I think the board should be aware of that and be willing to consider it so we can get it done as quickly as possible to make sure it's accurate.
Sure.
And also, I might add to the timeline, I'm thinking too that I don't think it's very realistic with it in regards to Sylvisa, because if Sylvisa has to go for legislation to allow the townships to become city or a town or other legal needs that the legislation has to take on, that's going to extend that timeline. And it may extend it beyond the date that we have with the two-year bill. So I have big questions about that. And I think
I agree.
That's too.
And I say we shoot for 6/1/24, but again, don't fall in love with that date because of the very things you cite. There's that, and there's other variables in play here that could absolutely impact that. Sheriff's office and Salt Lake County decide what they can do, but I think the UPD also needs to be flexible and understand that that date may not work. But I appreciate your comments, Mayor. If you can look on that, shoot for 6/1.
Isn't it 7/1/24?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, 7/1/24.
Don't take.
We need that extra bottle. Yeah, it was 7/1/25. Any other questions for me?
Questions, comments, from us?
Okay, appreciate the support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, we've got Under Sheriff Peterson for an update. Salt Lake County law.
Can I say something real quick? I just want to, the way I hear the three city model is that the UPD 2.0 is focusing on the cities and the city's needs. And I just want to say that I've heard that from some people that the townships are, anyway. I just feel like they're the only three that are 100% committed to the model right now. And that's why they're focusing on those three. If they can come up with an organization, I'm thinking out loud, if they can come up with a UPD 2.0 that meets the needs of those three, it would be super. But it would be easy to add a city, add a township, to that model. But the reason they're focusing there is because those three, there are no questions. I don't know why there's still questions among the townships, because I've restated it. I feel like the townships have said it at every turn, much like the three cities, that we're committed to the model and the economies of scale of servicing 200,000 residents. But yet I get why they're focusing on the three, because there doesn't seem to be as much question on the three city side as have come up on the townships.
I definitely want to make sure that we're doing a model that includes.
But it sounds like
Yeah.
three city
I know,
model, like the
and
townships
that's
have been
it.
cut out of the loop, and that is not the case. There's still some uncertainty on the township side. Sounds like maybe because Kearns wants numbers, but I just wanted to get that on the record.
Hey, Matt, a quick question for you. So you've created some draft structures of what things could look like, and I know as part of that, the townships are included. Are you going to be going through that with them?
Yes.
Individual meetings. Okay. So hopefully that also shows if there's a message just focus on the three cities.
Yeah, everything, and I met with Councilman Copus, everything I've shown in those meetings, I'm gonna show to everybody tomorrow. So I have meetings all day long to be some members tomorrow. So I'll be showing what those models look like, and the data that you derive from those models, which I think is very compelling. I'll share that with everyone over the next probably, I anticipate in the next 14 days, I will have met every single board member and all their.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I just wanted to kind of of back him up, but every conversation I've had with Chief Matz, he has indicated that he is including the townships in those conversations. So, but it is complicated. I think you kind of explained it, in,
Best I can.
yeah, but he is looking at including the townships in his model too. I do agree that it might be simpler to build that 3-city and then add. That's similar to what the sheriff's office is doing. We're only building the sheriff's office law enforcement bureau, but if we have to add contracts, that will come in later. And, you know, that may be what UPD 2.0 wants to do too as well, because you don't have any answers yet. So from this will be.
I just don't want the townships to hear that the cities are moving on, the 3 cities are moving on without us, the townships. I guess we need to go with the county. You know,
That is not.
we still have options as townships. We got a lot of options. So even though it sounds 3-city model sounds very focused on the 3 cities are getting, but that's not the case.
It's not.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, Board. I'll just give a quick update on the over 200 million county side, since the last 2 weeks. There was a discussion today about the statutory duties and countywide services that we'd be bringing back. I'll just let's go really quick, and when we come back for the next work session next month, I'd be happy to provide, you know, lists and some basic structures so you can kind of see those and how they would be brought back to the sheriff's office. So it's really clear for you, and I'd be happy to do that. Some of the statutory duties you bring back are records and canyon patrol, search and rescue, warrants, extraditions, ponds, and drug court. The ones that fall into countywide are the tactical court, the DEA, Salt Lake County gang project, major investigations, and the Metro Mental Health. The Metro Mental Health is one that we're still having 3 broad discussions about. There was to the committee that met, the countywide services committee, the Mayor Silvestriti chaired last year. That was actually one of the primary questions that came out of that committee that we've actually brought up with the mayor's office and a few council members. And we're kind of stirring that question around about where that Metro Mental Health unit would best be served as it's moved back over to the sheriff's office. Kind of what that would look like, whether it should be. I think one of the recommendations was like a subscription model, correct? Because that was the terminology. It was the agencies that use it would pay for it, agencies that don't wouldn't. We're looking at a couple other options. We haven't figured out them completely, but we're definitely going to be pushing towards investing in that still in the Metro Mental Health model and how we should best serve the county residents. Another note that actually also came out of the countywide services committee for the DEA and the Metro Gang Unit. Those are positions where the county's paying for some detectives countywide, and there's also actually a few like DEA, the Magna and Kearns and Mill Creek also pay for a DEA officer, and then other agencies around the valley. And there was a question about whether it's fair for the county to pay for just county officers and then have, you know, say Sandy's paying for their own to be in that unit. We have broached the topic, mayor's office and some council members about providing some kind of subsidy, some kind of voucher, whatever that may look like, to agencies that want to participate, and whether that's 4 allocations or whether that's 8 half allocations or whatever that looks like. I'm just throwing these numbers out. We're having those discussions right now about what that would look like and what the appetite amongst the mayor's office and the council members might be to support that. And really, it's just in the discussion stage right now as we're going over this rebuilding the sheriff's office. So we are trying to hit on those recommendations from the countywide services committee. We're moving right along with county HR. We've had a few more meetings with them in the past few weeks. They do have some preliminary market data that they're getting back for it. Now, remember that when they get their market data back, they're getting it back for the whole county. And they did tell us last week that they're getting some positions back and for one of the sworn positions. So we are getting information, and that's really hopeful, because they did tell us that our timeline to have that information in a really solid way in August is looking really good. So we feel really good about that. Obviously, they do need to have it back for their own countywide, the full countywide budget. So it's not like it's going to be put off until next year or until Christmas time. That's just not going to happen. So we will have numbers. We're just hoping we can get them in August and start really providing some good budget numbers on that. We've had some really good support from the mayor's office. We meet with either committee members from the mayor's staff or the mayor herself is very involved in this. We're working through how to build out the costing model. There's lots of moving parts, specifically how it would fit into the county's budget and how we would scale it up and down for providing, whether it's contracts, MOUs, interlocals, how we would do that. Some of the things we're specifically looking at, and it's been discussed today, crash analysis, public order, SWAT. There's low hanging fruit that makes a lot of sense that we would build partnerships with agencies around the valley, and we want to continue to do that, especially as it makes the most sense to keep people safe, which is our primary goal. Some of the calendar things that we're continuing to look at, I'll just keep repeating these. A few things that we'll be doing in the next month is hopefully we'll be bringing on a few support staff, like an office coordinator and possibly some administrative staff to assist. To Mayor Dolly's point about Chief Mazrin, it does get to the point where you do need to bringing on the administrative apparatus of the organization long before it actually gets up and starts going. So that is something that we'll be doing. We may have some more information about that next month. We're still on track to have good budget estimates in August, September to be able to provide to our members. Council presentation of like October, November, December, we for sure will be hiring if we're to have the 7/1/24, we'll be definitely bringing on like a chief deputy of the law enforcement bureau and some additional support staff, some technical positions to make sure that we have the bureau running smoothly. Open recruitment would start in January, some hiring in March, and May and June onboarding and training. It's kind of our timeline. We'll have a little more to the request of the board, a little more robust kind of visuals about what is being taken back, and we can kind of see that, sort through it and ask questions about it. If anybody has any questions now, I'd be happy to answer and discuss.
So I have a question.
Sure.
It's your area, but it sounds like county is intending to withdraw from UPD. And there's a notice requirement for that. I don't know if that's been given. I'm not saying that it's a requirement, but we should clarify that in terms of how we proceed legally, I think. We're gonna have to talk about if the county does withdraw, there's a separation issue to check the bit.
It's the 2025 date though, right?
No,
Well, I mean, it depends
before-
on when it is, right? I don't know.
Correct me, July 1 of 2024. That's the day the board is to exit, but I don't know if that means the entire county or just the sheriff or. So, yeah, probably does.
Well, I don't know. I guess that's not supposing, but I guess that's something we need to know. And you know, I mean, I guess I beg to ask the question, like, if the sheriff, if you're taking statutory duties and countywide function, why would the county remain in UPD? And to some extent, doesn't that give us issues with respect to the legislature if it stays in? I don't know.
So Mayor, if I could address that. I've been looking at that question, and I think that one of the fundamental rules of an interlocal participation governance is that you are receiving benefits and paying or offering something into the entity. So as of whatever date, the county is no longer receiving services from UPD and paying in for those services. That's what I would call a withdrawal or departure by operation of law. So whether we receive a notice or not, I still think in order to be a member of an interlocal, there has to be a relationship with the interlocal in terms of services and payments in. So whatever date is the final date that the county is receiving those services, it's also the final date that it would be eligible to be a member of UPD. So I guess I would call it a departure by operation of law, whether or not it's a withdrawal.
Yeah, it's just gonna be, you know, whether we get a formal notice or we don't get a formal notice, I mean, if we have a clear understanding, I just want to have that because I don't want to, and at some point, the county council may say, okay, we're not funding UPD the same way it has been funded, right? I mean, that doesn't, it makes sense that has to change. So, let's nail that down.
We'll have that conversation with our legal.
Okay.
See if
Thank
we can
you.
get that clarified.
Thank you.
Oh, we're gonna have a conversation with you guys, so,
We will.
yeah. So, I just basing,
You're late on your 1 year notice.
I'm just basing the date off of what the board gave me.
Yeah, yeah. no,
That was
that's-
direction from the board, so, you know, we can have that conversation with our legal and the mayor's office and get you an answer.
But so that's, I'm just saying, that's another piece of this that we need to factor into, right? I mean, what's gonna happen there, what are people's expectations about, you know, about the separation if that happens? What would be the purpose of the county staying in if they aren't getting the UPD isn't providing countywide and or, you know, statutory services, things like that. So let's figure out where we're on.
I did want to clarify one thing when Jake mentioned the crash team, the car unit, and you said you would have some pushback on that. We're not saying the county would run the unit. We're just saying we would participate. The same with the SWAT. We're not saying the county's going to run the SWAT team. We're just saying we think it's good. Honestly, the entire county, all police agencies should be one SWAT team. That's our thoughts. We should all be sharing those services. Everybody's paying for extras. And in order to save money, we should all come together in those kind of services, but we're not saying it's got to be the county. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure, and I 100% agree with what you just said about, and there is hopefully the ability for UPD 2.0 to be sharing stuff that you might be supervising and vice versa. Those things should be handled, I think, by some kind of an interlocal agreement so that there isn't any question about you know, subsidies or things like that. So we don't get into the same kind of situation with the legislature that we have. But I 100% agree that we'll be able to at least preserve some of the efficiencies that we've enjoyed in the past by making arrangements like that. We just need to figure out what's going to make sense and where those things reside.
And what's best for the community.
And I think part of this visualization, however you want to present it, this would be helpful in that. How do you envision those other areas? And having that clarification of not taking car but participating.
Sure. Do that. We have a few examples we've been working through. Last night, had a few discussions about a few of these specific areas happening there. So. You bet.
All right, the next item is UPD reorganization discussion. I feel pretty thorough about that we've done that.
Can I ask a favor? Before we go into the general discussion, could we move up items numbers 7 and 8? I think they would make out in the general discussion once we cover those.
I'm happy to do that. I am curious if we have any other general discussion that folks want to hit on this. I don't know that we do.
Okay.
I think we've covered a lot.
I feel like we've covered it, so. Okay, with that, we'll just move into item 7, which is the fund balance discussion. So Harry, whenever you're ready.
Well, the next two topics are somewhat intertwined, and I'll cover them in the order they're on here. But what I want to talk about first of all is the question of fund balance and what can and cannot be used for. So back up a little bit. When we formed the UPD created a formula or created a departure formula that is an assets and liabilities standard. And assets of the organization include precinct fund balances, subject to claims for liabilities of the organization. And when we did a formula that the departure formula, it included assets of the organization and how they're calculated. And precinct balances were not considered at that time. Therefore, when there's a departure, we don't consider precinct assets or precinct fund balance as an individual asset of a member, but rather as an asset of the organization. As we go forward with reorganizing the UPD, I just want to make it clear that whatever precinct fund balances there are, that they're not looked at as a cash account that can be taken with you if you depart. It is subject to the claims of assets and liabilities of the organization. They're both calculated in the aggregate as well as individually. They're not an asset that is separately considered. So the reason I say that is because I don't want there to be any confusion as members are looking at their options, that they look at that as a check that they're going to get upon departure. And so with that in mind, I just wanted to clarify that we use those for internal purposes, and that could include paying your fee, whatever else is available, purchasing an asset for your precinct, but that they are not considered cash that you can walk out the door with without first considering the liabilities of the organization and the overall assets. So I say that just to make sure that there's no misperception on what a precinct fund balance is. It is still subject to, under the interlocal, the claims of the entire organization, as well as the departure formula. It's counted as an asset that is subject to claims of different liabilities too. So I thought I'd ask any questions there, but I just want to, as we look at our options, not give people the perception that that's a check they're going to get upon, in addition to whatever else there is. It's calculated pursuant to the formula of all assets and liabilities of the organization. And the interlocal itself trumps what resolution that we forming the precinct balances. So without the question came up, actually one of the members thought that was cash that they can just get if they leave, and I don't want that to be the impression of anybody as they look at their options, whether to contract or what this is. I'd ask for any questions or clarifications if there are any. Okay. Right. I've spent the last few months working on a draft of the interlocal, and it's about as far along now as we can get without some guidance from the board. And the big question is essentially, what do we do with the departure formula going forward? I want to thank, first of all, our friends at UFA for the hard work they did on their interlocal. It has largely governed how we structured what I would call the UPD 2.0 interlocal. The UPD will still be governed by a board of members of the UPD. Those members are defined as those receiving benefits of the organization. We will be providing law enforcement services. And right now it includes, by definition, all of the members of Slovisa and all of the city members of the UPD. Slovisa is a member, but its participation will be governed by the individual members receiving services, not the Slovisa itself. That will have a voting member and just be represented as a member, as a billing entity. So we aren't changing the structure of Slovisa and its relationship to UPD. We aren't changing the structure of the members of UPD. Salt Lake County is not listed as a member because presumably it won't be receiving any services from the UPD. One of the key issues as we go forward will be the question of who is a member, who's going to be receiving services. So right now the structure is it's everybody except Salt Lake County who's currently a member of UPD is listed as a member of the new UPD 2.0. Obviously that can change. My personal opinion is that looking at this issue as to what Slovisa can do, I believe as a district it can choose to contract with whomever it chooses for service to certain areas. But if we're not providing that service, then they wouldn't be a member of the UPD. So those who join a contract model would not be members of UPD 2.0. They could later join, there would be some complications with that, but I'm just saying that under the circumstances, that would be the situation. If a contracting member or if a member of the UPD goes to Salt Lake County under the departure formula, the assets of the member, let's say it's a Slovisa member, actually appear to belong to Slovisa, not to the member, because they're the taxing and paying entity. So they would decide what cars go back to, whoever the entity is contracting with, although that's a question mark we'll have to deal with as we go forward.
They being Slovisa.
Yeah, so in other words, Slovisa is the paying entity. So Slovisa is the one that has the sort of assets and liabilities claim off of UPD if its members leave the UPD to contract somewhere. We'll work through that, but it's important to note that even though you are voting members of the UPD, there's still the financial relationship is with Slovisa if there are departments, and we'll have to work through that. I haven't had a conversation yet with Ms. Anderson regarding some of the legal issues regarding UPD and Slovisa, but that's an issue out there. The county, of course, as it departs, by operation of law, I call it, would be entitled to its proportionate share of assets and liabilities. That would be vehicles assigned to county direct and to incorporated areas and canyons. It's kind of the same thing there. And what other assets that we would look at? UPD uses some assets that are already titled in the name of the county. And those assets would automatically go to the county without being part of the calculation. So one of the things that we'll need to talk with the county about is how we go about starting to implement this, although we don't have a date certain at this point. We're all working towards the June 2024 date. The big issue remains to be resolved before we can sort of start circulating a draft of an interlocal comment and whatnot. Is the question is, what will the new departure formula be? Does it take into account precinct silos or not? Does it include is it what UFA does, which you just get whatever assets you brought in, and if they're traceable when you depart, you can take it back. There's no vested right to any assets of the organization. It wouldn't govern any current departures, but when we form a new UPD, that's a question that we need to answer. A suggested model would be you get the assets assigned to your precinct, vehicles and equipment there, and that's it. It would be a lot easier to calculate, a lot less to argue about if we get away from the assets and liabilities calculation, because there's a lot to argue about assets and liabilities. So one of the things I just wanted to put out here is before we really finalize a new interlocal and start circulating it, what I drafted in there was precinct assets and equipment as your departure formula. But that's a suggestion from me because of its simplicity, and we've done it, we've calculated those already going forward. Essentially, it's up to you as members to decide what you would want that to be. It does not take into account precinct silos. There maybe could be a formula that discusses, and you get a certain amount of your precinct silo, whether it's 100%, 50%, that's an unknown that would probably have to go through a finance committee discussion. But there are options we have, but until we kind of answer that question, both about the precinct silos going forward, are they capped? Should they be capped? Is there a percentage that we want to say you can take with you, or whether it's 100, 50, 20, whatever that number is? It's the question that is legal counsel, I can't answer for you. I can only make suggestions, but that's really kind of the big issue going forward is number one, if you're going to be a member of UPD, you have to be receiving services. I believe that's required by law. Number two is the question of what do we do about a departure formula? How can we simplify it? And how do we treat precinct silos?
How does that apply to precinct silos? How does it apply to Immigration Canyon and Brighton, since we're only served by Canyon Patrol?
Can you say that again? I apologize.
How does that discussion apply to both Immigration County and Town of Brighton, since we're only served by county patrol?
Well, it would be whatever's listed in your precinct. There is a general Salt Lake County precinct. I don't know for sure on that. That's something we would need to talk about going forward is what is the if immigration and Brighton are going to be members of, you know, how do we calculate the fee? How do we calculate their equipment going forward? Because it's been easier when Salt Lake County was a member of UPD to sort of aggregate in the synergies of canyon patrol and Brighton and immigration coverage as they separate out. That is something that's a discussion point we'll need to have, because I don't have the answer for that right now.
No, philosophically, I don't really agree with the idea of building fund balances in your precinct. I think one, it's hurt the structure of the organization, because I think precincts build that fund balance and view it as you were saying, kind of this, oh, well, I've got this piggy bank here, and it makes it easy. It makes it an easier decision for them to separate. You know what I mean? So I think my own personal feeling is, if cities are going to build fund balances, it ought to be in their own general fund or their capital improvement fund. And if a precinct's running efficiently, what we would do is if we set a policy that basically said, look, you can have, so let's say you say separate, 50% of your precinct fund balance to be applied towards your liabilities, right? And then there may be something left and there may not. We would basically, I think what we would do is, if we built fund balance, we would just have a policy in place that said, we're going to strip down to a certain level every year and reduce we go through a budgeting process. You've got a 6% increase, and we would take that additional precinct fund balance and reduce our member fee by that amount every year, understanding that there's no benefit for us to build that. I think that's what we would do. So, I mean, I don't know if it is your taxpayer money that's gone in there. I think it's our taxpayers' money to have a right to it. But as a policy, I think we should not incentivize our precincts to build excessive fund balance, because I just don't think it's healthy for the organization. That's just kind of my opinion.
I agree with what you're saying. But I also think that the introduction of the idea of the precinct fund balance is a good idea, where there is an underexpend that's attributable to a particular precinct not spending what their taxpayers have paid for police services. And I also think that if we had that policy in place before the departure of Harriman or Riverton, we might even have avoided that. That was the rub that they were so upset about, that they were paying money in and they couldn't see how they were getting a benefit from it. And they were just rolling into the department-wide fund balance at the end of the year, at the end of the fiscal year. So I don't think it's a good idea for any member to build fund balance in there beyond some kind of cushion. But I also think that the way we account for that is a great idea, because it alleviates friction of people thinking they're not getting it.
Yeah, I just use 50%. I don't know what that is, but philosophically, if we're going to build a new interlocal, I think there's some critical pieces in there we ought to fix, and I think that's one of them. That we ought to come up with a policy. My opinion is we should come up with a policy as a board where we basically say, look, what's an appropriate amount of precinct fund balance to retain at the end of the year? And certainly then you can use, if you've managed your precinct efficiently, or you have to run understaffed and you're building fund balance in there that your taxpayers paid into, then apply it as a reduction to the next year, and you receive that benefit, right? But I just think we should my opinion is we should fix that piece of it somehow in the policy of our new interlocal, to not encourage people to build fund balances inside of their precinct. They should manage their precinct to whatever budget is required, and not build extra money in there.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with using the interlocal saying what Harry has said before, which is that the precinct fund balance is not part of the departure formula, so that removes an incentive to build that up. You know, for anybody thinking they're going to need to take that, I think that should be explicitly in the interlocal. It's not part of what you take it.
You know, the other, not to drag this out. So anyway, I don't know what the answer to that is, but philosophically, yeah, I think that's a piece that ought to be fixed in a new interlocal and a departure formula. But the other piece is the one, you know, if people are going to join UPD, we shouldn't make it easy for them to leave. If they're going to join, they should be committed to this organization. And I think this idea of, you know, the 1 year withdrawal, making it easy for people to get out has also been kind of a destabilizing piece. And I don't know the fix to that, if we extend it or how long we can extend it, but I think there ought to be, if you're going to join, there ought to be a statement inside the interlocal that says you have a commitment to this organization. If you're going to do that, it's just not going to be a let's dip our foot in the water of UPD, and if we don't like it, we'll withdraw and create this instability inside the organization that way too. And I don't know what the answer to that is either, but I think that ought to be something that this board considers in terms of if you're going to join, you should be committed to the organization.
So to answer that question, the draft interlocal, what I did is while using the UFA model, I went to the interlocal and incorporated specific things in there that we had previously agreed to that I think were beneficial, including the 5-year vesting period. So that's in there now. That wasn't in a UFA model, but it's something that I think puts it, and if you leave with prior to 5 years, you don't get anything. That once you have vested in 5 years, then you can get your precinct assets, and so it's like I've got weighted voting in there that mirrors the language in our weighted voting amendment. I've got the ability to nominate somebody other than a mayor, but you can replace them with a council member or high-ranking executive official if you choose to for specific meetings when you can't be there. So your vote is still carried forward. So I tried to go through and incorporate all of our existing UPD amendments into the new interlocal that are consistent with what we've approved in the past. But like I said, the hardest issue that I don't have an answer for before I circulate it is the departure formula. And again, the suggestion is going to be, like you said, that it defines out of assets whatever precinct fund balance there is, and the it would be vehicles assigned to the precinct would be what you get after 5 years of vesting. So that's a suggestion that I think makes sense. I have seen some problems with, you know, what happened to the organizational fund balance when we created precinct funds, and the fact we need to now replenish that. And you know, UPD, if you look at all of our cash, is a well-funded organization, but the way we divided it up, it doesn't look that way, and it looks like we've got an audit flag when we shouldn't. Not an audit flag, but a concern about insufficient departmental fund balance. So one of the separate issues should be at some point, how do we look at not depriving our fund balance of sufficient cash going forward so that this is an annual problem for us, because it really shouldn't be. It's just the way that that going forward. And I think Debbie's plan has dealt with it in terms of replenishing it in a certain time period. And a lot of members have used their fund balance, their precinct fund balance for that purpose. So when we solve the problem voluntarily, I'm just thinking, how do we solve the problem institutionally going forward? And that's something that perhaps is discussion for a later date. What we have in place now is what we will go with going forward. But in a UPD 2.0, it is something I think we need to take a look at a discussion point. And the purpose of raising it today is not to expect an answer today, but to maybe give us something to put on our list of things to discuss going forward as we look at what UPD 2.0 will look like in terms of managing precinct versus organizational fund balance.
Can I just ask another question? I'm sorry to drag this out, but I don't, this is more of a question, but do we think that, or is it anticipated that as we reorganize this, that we'll be able to retain our current branding? You know, cars, simple stuff like that, but it's a question which is, I'm just curious about that, but my other question is, and this is an important one, is what, is there an interpretation in terms of merit? And, once we reorganize, is all our merit, can we automatically retain? Our pay structure will transition over, our merit positions will transfer over. Is that a fair question at this point?
Yeah, and the UPD 2.0 structure we're working on, we're still members of the Peace Officers Merit Commission for counties of the first class, because statutorily we're required to be in there. That could change, but it's a system that works for us. It's a system we know. And so in terms of looking at the merit system for officers, that shouldn't change. We're going to be a continuation of UPD. So we're doing what UFA did. We're amending and restating our interlocal agreement on the effective date, but everything continues on as including our branding. Now, if for whatever reason UPD would dissolve, that would be different. But in terms of the amending, restating, and continuing, there are a lot of benefits to us financially to do it that way, including that we don't have to pay everybody out when we switch over from UPD to UPD 2.0. If we were to dissolve, everybody would need to get paid out their existing, existing vacation, and that number was, we looked at it, that number was in the millions, versus carrying that over to the new UPD. So the plan for the transition legally structuring is to continue UPD on the basis of including branding. Obviously, some of the big issues are where we're going to be housed. I think it's a good idea to move forward with trying to get some ideas. I do know this, that in 2020, I believe, Chet Pinkett had done an analysis on what it would cost to form a new UPD based upon 2020 numbers. They've gone up, obviously, except in one area where I think we may benefit is commercial property's gone down. There's a lot of available space out there, a lot more than there was in 2020. And so I think that we may get some benefits from the fact that COVID did a number on commercial lease facilities. If we can find places that will fit our rate more available, I think the vacancy rate in the county, you would know this, Bob, I think it's around 40% on commercial office space right now.
That seems really high, but your point's correct, that there's available office space.
So that's something though that, we need to have an accurate model. We need to know what our facilities are going to cost. And I think that's why we're trying to get some ideas there. So we know both that under either a 3-city model or a UPD altogether, and it may not be altogether. There may be members of Slovisa that are better served by the county. I don't see a legal impediment to dividing its services. The money comes in to Slovisa, and Slovisa can decide how to spend it. So at least that's my opinion on how it works. I think that I would love to hear at some point what Slovisa's new council thinks of it, and I don't want to obligate her now by asking her that question because it's complex. So I look forward to having a conversation with her at some point. I certainly think she and everyone needs to kind of understand what the issues are before they look at what the answers are. So, yeah.
Today's probably not the day, but I would like to have a further conversation about it upon departure. 100% of the precinct assets go with it. Those were shared costs among all of us. For them to walk with 100% of that, I need to think through that, but.
The reason why we have done that under the departure formula is that largely the precinct pays for those assets already. When they're getting billed for an officer, they get billed for a vehicle. Now, mind you, what we've done on the vehicles, the reason we structured it as fair market value rather than book value is because book value is low. So as we look at the asset calculation, we recognize that we're losing resale value on the vehicles when they get transferred. So there's an assessment that goes with that to recognize the fact that you're getting a better deal, because let's say our vehicles cost 45 and when they're cycled out, we get 20 back.
Do you see it differently between a contract city versus a Slovisa member? upon departure should it be different? I don't know.
Well, I think they have the same entitlements. The question is who gets the entitlement? Is it the Slovisa member or is it Slovisa? That's an interest, we haven't had to face that before, so it's kind of an interesting question, but it's somebody's entitled to the same treatment they would get if they, you know, as a city would. The question is who, I don't know, but it is a question of, you know, those Slovisa members have been paying into UPD for those precinct assets, and they should get whatever the same benefit is of those payments. The question simply is whether they go to Slovisa and they're credited to that member or not is an open question. But I think under current departure formula, we haven't had to look at that. I just still think it's the paying entity and let Slovisa parse that out, but that may not be fair to a member if they don't give them appropriate credit. That's an open question we will have to look at if it looks like somebody's going to be leaving. But again, the key to the 2.0 is right now, at least the plan is under the amended and restated local that everybody's going to be a member going forward except Salt Lake County because we're not going to be providing services to them.
Would this be an appropriate fund balance specifically for the finance committee?
I think that would be because I do think that's a funding question that CFO should participate in and it's a complex issue rather than governance. I do think that finance would be the one to take a look at how do we deal with that going forward in the new UPD 2.0. But one of the issues is should there be a cap on how much you can do and what should that cap be? That's a question that I don't have even a suggestion for. But is it a percentage of your overall budget? What is that? I think that would be an appropriate finance committee issue for members to talk about going forward is what's a stable way to have a fund balance that doesn't chronically leave the department fund balance underfunded.
And then I'm curious on the 5-year, the needing to stay in, would that be a good governance conversation?
It can be. Again, I'm going to call a meeting of the governance committee to talk about this, but I wanted the broader question of the unanswered question of departure formula and fund balance calculation. Going forward, I can circulate what I have, which excludes fund balance from the departure formula. It's basically just listed as if you're vested, you get precinct vehicles and equipment as a discussion point, and we can talk about it then, but maybe before we do that, finance committee meeting to discuss the question of how do we treat fund balance in a UPD 2.0 is a good one because it doesn't have to be in the interlocal. It would provide perhaps more flexibility to future boards to decide that. But I do think that in terms of departures, it would be excluded as a calculation in terms of assets of future members. And because we're restating it, one of the things that's in there is that we're including a waiver of claims beyond the asset the precinct asset issue going forward, so that members who signed the new UPD 2.0 recognize it will govern departures from the date they signed it. So we're not litigating perhaps what we had in the past. If that's a problem, then we can talk about that. But again, I'm trying to bring predictability so we don't have a Taylorsville situation where there are a number of issues we're arguing about in court. And instead, we're making this as crystal clear as possible. So members who depart know what they're getting, UPD knows what they're getting, and it provides the least amount of litigation expense for everyone going forward. Assets and liabilities is a great concept until you try to put it into application. It does have some difficulties. We think our case is strong, by the way, and we filed a motion for summary judgment on the Taylorsville case. It'll be considered by the court sometime in the next 3 months. But in the meantime, I think it would be better for us to simplify it.
Sure, I was going to ask you about that. Did you send me a copy of the papers?
Yes, I will.
And I've asked Terry to share it with everybody because you should be able to show it to your legal and kind of.
That's public record.
Sure. Just on a personal note, before we ever heard of 374, I scheduled a trip to Europe this month, this coming up. And so I'll be gone for 3 weeks. So, I haven't had an extended vacation since I joined UPD, and I'm really looking forward to this. I apologize, it's falling in the middle of some unanswered questions, but, one of the questions we have to answer before we leave today is, do we have an August meeting? And for organizational purposes, when we set these originally, we stopped them. Today's the last set meeting, so the board would need to decide when. I get back August 5th, so if you set it the first week, it's gonna be tough for me to participate. I don't have to be here. I think I've covered what some of the open issues are, but if you wanted to set it for the week after, I will be here, or go without me. And I also, availability on the July meeting's tough. It's my first and only full day in London, and it was put in smack dab at 2 o'clock their time for me to attend the meeting. So if I could avoid that, I'd prefer to.
Let's move to that next item then. I would personally suggest we keep going with this first Wednesday of the month for work session. But
I agree with that, and we don't need to have Barry there for that meeting.
Can I make another comment about the redrafting of interlocal? I would like to have it have more teeth as well. I don't know if the 5-year option, but I remember the days with the county and we were being annexed. You couldn't do any long range planning. There was instability in every department in the county. If you're here for the long term. Maybe I hate to use the word, make it harder to get out, but that shows your commitment. If you're in here for 5-year contracts or whatever, renews every 5 years, and maybe it's a 2 or a 3-year exit clause. And we could shorten that by a board vote to 12 months, should a city have something that was unforeseen, but the board could let somebody out sooner. But we've got to be able to give our employees, this 12-month window is just, it's too uncertain. And I think that contributes to a lot of our problems.
But
It's the uncertainty.
yeah, I think given that non-funding provisions under state law, it's too problematic to require that our obligation be funded beyond a year. But a great way to do that is to say that you don't get anything if you leave for 5 years or something like that.
I'll leave that to the attorneys, but I would like to see the new draft have some more.
Sure, I will email that I've got out in the next day or two. I just want to go through and make sure that I didn't miss any edits or issues, and then I'll be happy to circulate it. And again, the departure area is just a suggestion. Obviously, it's something that you're all free to come back with. I know the UFA interlocal took months and months of meetings once there was an initial draft where they finally arrived at something that works for them. So I recognize that rather than try to create it by a committee, I thought I'd create and then turn it over to the committee so that we've included most of the stuff, but I'm certain there will be changes.
I just want to add that any of those changes we make, if we are looking at growing this organization, I want to make sure we're flexible enough that we make it something that we provide the service that people want to join. And be careful with how much we incentivize by forcing them to stay and focusing on that service amount and making sure that communities that have not been working.
And I think we could talk about that issue separately, but in terms of a new member, somebody might come in, negotiate that. But one of the things this department really could use is the stability and to know that we're not going to have changes 5 years in.
If you can give Harry your feedback while he's gone, if you just email him, that's fine, or you can have a separate meeting when he gets back. But I really think it'd be helpful to send all of you the draft, let you all look at it and throw out your ideas, maybe, while he's gone. That'd be very helpful. So we'll make sure that Harry gets it out before he leaves and
So bombard him with emails on his vacation.
And
just when he gets back, we want him to take a breather.
Be horribly unresponsive, but please don't get mad.
Okay, so we've got, we'll continue the work session meetings. Harmony, you'll send out updated invites for that, and then otherwise we've got our meeting on July 20th. our regular schedule.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of our June 3rd.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Do we have any other business?
I just wanted to say that, so with these meetings, it kind of feels like we are maybe becoming enemies. I want to ensure that we're not. We are taking a look, we're working together with Chief Mazur and Under Sheriff to try to do that, but rumors go crazy. We still have UPD currently running. And that's the priority for me, is that we continue to run in the best way that we can. So we're trying to squash as many rumors. If you guys could help with those, whatever rumors that you hear. And that one thing that we're all committed to is being very transparent, presenting everything we have, doing the best that we can, because we don't want our employees to feel like they're being left out. And sometimes they may feel that way when we're having these tough conversations in public meetings, but I don't know any other way to do it. But I do want to, assure you that our top priority is running the UPD, current UPD. Because we have to. It's still, our communities are still needing law enforcement, and we're doing everything that we possibly can. At the same time, we're working on everything else. But that is our number one priority, is to continue to make sure that your communities have public safety and the best that we can. And the more that we can encourage our officers to stay in the game, in their minds in the game, it helps. So any encouragement that this board can do for us, we would appreciate it. So we're doing everything that we can on our end, but it would be helpful on your end.
Sure. All right, we have a motion. We'll move. We have a motion. Second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.